The worst was the TV. Once it was with my student, I had some exams, so they asked me at midday to explain what it's called in French, the cold progression. It's the fact that, with inflation, the taxation can increase silently in a way.
Right.
So she said you have 30 seconds to explain what is the so-called cold progression.
Right.
Okay. Oh, man, you have to explain in 30 seconds.
Right.
So it's better. It's more relaxed.
Do you know who Richard Feynman was, the physicist? So he's kind of he died, I don't know, he probably died 30 years ago, but he won the Nobel Prize in Physics in, 1975 or something.
Yeah.
And after he won the Nobel Prize, or it was announced, he held a press conference, and someone said, "Professor, tell us what it is exactly you're working on that you got the Nobel Prize for." So he starts to explain it. You can sort of see, it's like totally incomprehensible to anybody in the room.
Yes.
And somebody interrupts and says, "Sorry, but could you maybe explain it to us in 30 seconds?"
Yeah.
And he kind of stops and he says, "If I could explain it in 30 seconds, it wouldn't be worth the Nobel Prize."
Yeah, exactly.
So I kind of think that's really, what you're doing is, too bad there's no Nobel Prize in finance. Well, there's economics, right? So who knows? But I mean, the more, the deeper you go into a subject, the harder it is to kind of explain it to somebody.
Yes, because it gets deeper and deeper. And as long as you go on, it's getting more and more complex, in fact.
Sure.
And you become very humble because there's so many things that need to be added in other fields where I'm not an expert, of course. So, it's very challenging.
How much work did you have to do to understand the whole AI and robotics field, aside from a taxation issue? Right?
Yes, exactly. So I read a lot of books, actually.
Yeah.
I spoke with some people in the computer, in the tech area.
Yeah.
So, and the problem is that you are never up to date because the way why we are speaking,
especially that changes all the time.
And it's very controversial also. Some people say they go that far, and others say, no, it's not true. In fact, it's not what they say. Some people say, no, it's not intelligence. We are not at this stage. I mean, it's very, very controversial. On top of that, so it's very difficult to get a fair, I would say, evaluation of where we stand.
So in a way, a physical book almost is out of date, weeks after it's been printed, and you need to maybe just do this online only.
There's this is a totally different area, but I read an article recently in which a physicist is just claiming that we might be, even our whole universe is a black hole, in fact.
Yes.
And we are trapped, the whole universe is trapped in a sort of a enormous black hole. I mean,
I feel that way every day.
You read this and you just, it's just out of control of your mind.
Yeah.
I mean, it's apparently it's because of the recent discovery that they found that this is a theory that came out, actually. So a new theory, I think even a few months ago. So
I don't know. I know I listen to a podcast almost every day of a guy who is, this is not the subject, but he brings it up all the time. He says we are actually computer simulation. He thinks there's some greater beings or another civilization from who knows where that created us.
Right.
And
yes, like Matrix, the movie.
It's similar to that.
Similar to this.
Yeah. And I don't quite buy it, but it's interesting to think about because he knows enough about it that he actually talks. He can say, here's one of the other reasons why I believe that, and he'll say something and kind of think, oh, yeah, it kind of makes some sense actually.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yes, for example, there's one thing I believe in is that there are some connection between the people, for sure. We don't see them. We might see them eventually in the future.
Right.
Because clearly, for example, if you think of somebody, and somebody you know pretty well, there's a lot of chance he or she is thinking at you at the same time. Absolutely. It happened a lot of it.
Okay.
For example, I'm sure you all experience that. You think very deeply about somebody.
Yeah.
No matter a friend, whatever. Mm-hmm. And he would call you.
The phone rings.
Or yes.
Yeah.
This happens a lot of time.
Yeah.
Not a lot of time. So
I think it's similar. It's even similar a little bit to the idea of when you learn a new word.
Yeah.
Right. And then suddenly, like the next day, it's there again. And then 2-3 days later, it's there again.
Yeah.
And it's not like a new technical word that's just been invented, but it's some word that's, been around that you've never really, you've never really mastered that word. And then suddenly it's everywhere, right? I don't know.
Yeah.
Strange.
So maybe there's a special connection
Glitch in the matrix.
between these people. For example, your friends.
Right.
There's a connection that you don't see, and it's there.
Yeah.
And suddenly you just turn it on by thinking about him or her.
Yeah.
And the same occurs. I mean, maybe, I don't know. We will see one day, huh?
Maybe so. Maybe so. Hello and welcome to another edition of GGBa's Getting Serious with Woody Wade. I'm Woody Wade, and today I'm speaking with a truly unique guest, someone who can talk tax law by day and rock it hard by night. Xavier Oberson is one of Switzerland's leading experts in tax law, advising on everything from global tax policies to the challenges of AI and automation. He's a professor in the Faculty of Law at the University of Geneva, here, where I'm visiting his offices. And he's the author of several very important and highly regarded books on the subject of taxation. And because of all of this expertise he's a key voice in shaping Switzerland's tax landscape, which we'll be talking about as the hour progresses. Among many fields in which he's recognized as a top thought leader, one of them, actually many of them are interesting, of course, but one of them that I found particularly interesting is how to tax AI, how to tax robots. And in his book, which is now called Taxing Artificial Intelligence, that's the second edition. The original edition was called Taxing Robots, Helping the Economy to Adapt to the Use of Artificial Intelligence. He describes possible solutions to the anticipated problem of declining tax revenues that would come about if people actually work less and robots work more in our place. So who will pay the income tax then? Who will pay some of the other taxes? I'm really looking forward to that discussion. But beyond the world of finance and taxation, he's also a leading light in Switzerland's music scene. He's the president of the Montreux Jazz Artists Foundation and also on the board of trustees of the Fondation du Grand Théâtre here in Geneva, which is basically the opera. But that's not all. Xavier is also an accomplished electric guitarist on his own, and he has not only one rock band, but two. So whether we're talking about tax reforms or guitar riffs, I think we're going to have a really interesting conversation today. And I want to thank you very much, Xavier, for joining me for this discussion. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you very much. Looking forward to it.
What I wanted to do is I've got a handful of questions that I wanted to ask you, but just as a kind of a framework or help us to kind of dive into the subject. But the first one, I think, because of your expertise in tax law,
right?
I think it's a good place for us to start, right? And of course, the tax law is evolving all the time, and especially if you look outside the borders of Switzerland, there are ideas like the OECD wants to have sort of minimum tax, that sort of thing. How is Switzerland positioned to participate in those conversations and maybe fight for its own position?
Yeah. I think the position of Switzerland has evolved dramatically since 20 years, I would say. Before 2009, more or less, Switzerland was always trying to defend its position,
right?
Especially in the area of exchange of information.
Correct.
We didn't want to exchange information.
Right.
We had the banking secrecy.
Right. And
it was really part of the, let's say, competitive advantage, we call it, for Switzerland. And then the pressure kept going on. It was so strong around 2008 with the UBS crisis and the financial crisis of 2008 that we had to change our position. Right. And Switzerland decided to do it. It was a famous press conference in 2009.
Yes.
If I recall, it was even Friday, the 13th of March 2009.
Okay.
And then we decided that we are going to exchange information. And I think from that date, if you look backwards, Switzerland has really changed its position. We are part of the OECD.
Right.
And we actively now participate and we tend to follow in fact, the main international tax policy rules, which are developed by the OECD since that time.
But developed by the OECD means with Switzerland's input, I hope, right?
Yes, and that's a key issue. Absolutely, I totally agree with you, because this is a big problem for Switzerland, because we have a democratic system under which any piece of legislation, especially in tax, is subject to vote, and sometimes rejected by the people. So this, in this new forum of the OECD and development of tax rules, for example, the 15% minimum tax, Switzerland was in a kind of strange position, because it had to adapt these rules and still keep the legislative process of asking, if required by a referendum, a vote from the people. But in fact, for this example, we were able to achieve that result in a way, both keeping the democratic process and adopting the rules of the OECD.
Because in other words, the people agreed.
The people agreed.
Okay.
It was in June, I think 2023. So the people agreed with a high percentage of majority. They agreed on this 15% tax. And I always say in international congresses, I think we are the only country in the world under which this OECD proposal has been debated on TV, on the newspaper, everywhere, and voted and accepted by the people.
Yes.
We could be proud of that, I think, in a way.
Yeah, interesting. Because, typical of these kinds of things, they just are top down and basically imposed on countries.
Yes, and especially if you go into the details, the 15% is, let's say, easy to understand as a minimum profit tax. But when you go into the detail of the matter, it's extremely complex, the way the system has been implemented. And we try to describe more or less the essential element of that system for the vote.
But that required then a communication program, right? To explain to people, here's what you're going to be voting on. And how do you simplify things enough so that the average man on the street can understand that?
The way we do it is, for example, the government always published a sort of a booklet for the vote. And they try to put the argument pros and cons. To make sure that both arguments are balanced. Because, in fact, there has been even some litigation in the past about this democratic process. You can say if the presentation of the arguments was not fair, the vote could be challenged in court.
Basically, yes,
It's very rare, but it happened.
It could happen,
in the past. So the government always tried to describe the best it can, and the journalists and the political parties try also to help for the people to understand these highly technical rules.
And each of the parties also gets a little space in this booklet, explaining what their position is on these issues, so that if you're someone who typically votes with one party, you might see that, this is the reason why they think this is something we should do, or another party says, no, we should not do it, or whatever. I love this transparency here. It's a very, it's a, how can I say this? It's like, there's trust in people's opinion here. It's like we're turning this over to you, the population, to decide. So we need you to be informed. We don't want to mislead you, and so you vote in one way and then find out later that we've basically been pulling the wool over your eyes about this issue.
But there are some limits to that, I would say. When things get really, really technical, it can happen that there's no referendum, surprisingly. And one example to that, for me, is the automatic exchange of information. Automatic exchange of information in tax matter took place as of 2017. And it was a major event, a major change of the Swiss policy. For example, surprisingly enough, there was no referendum. So it was accepted by the Swiss Federal Parliament. Like that, no referendum, and it entered into force. It's pretty surprising. So there may be two explanations to that. The first one is to say, everybody agreed, the right, the left, everybody was in agreement with that, so I said yes. But another explanation could also be that the technicalities of this exchange of information, which is influenced by the FATCA rules of the United States, I mean, pretty technical, dry legal material. Maybe then some political party, or they say, okay, we just go ahead with that and we trust the system. It's another possibility.
Would there still be a possibility for a referendum now, or is it too late?
No, now it's too late.
It's too late.
Once
it's in law.
Now it's too late.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the law could be repealed. There's a process for that, right?
The law could be repealed, or there could be an initiative to change the constitution, which is another way.
Yes.
And to ask to abandon this. But that is highly unlikely.
Right. I mean, that's an exceptional case in any event, right? But,
yes, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So you would look at this. I mean, what you have here now is a different kind of a balance between transparency and privacy, right, compared to 20 years ago, as you said, right? How do you think Switzerland is actually judging that? Are people happy with it? Do they think it's been a success?
Yes. You mean domestically or abroad? Basically?
Well, let's start with domestic.
Domestic. So domestic, I think it's well accepted.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was a success looking backwards because some people, for example, they said if you repeal the bank secrecy, this would be the end of the financial system of Switzerland. And it's absolutely not
didn't happen. Yeah,
it didn't happen.
Right.
So on the contrary, in fact.
Right.
So I think that was the right move at the right moment.
Yeah.
There's only one thing which remains is the banking secrecy domestically.
Yes.
So still today, the tax administration, for example, on my tax return, they cannot directly contact the bank and say, oh, by the way, how much does Mr. Oberson has on his bank account?
Right.
They still rely on me
to be honest.
Right. So that's the only remaining side.
Right.
But still now some cantons and political parties are starting to talk about it.
Oh.
We might see some evolution on this.
Oh, interesting.
But internationally, this banking secrecy doesn't exist anymore. And I think it's well recognized abroad. Recently, by the way, we had a meeting with some French representative, and they said that they were pretty happy with the way the exchange of information system works.
The French were happy.
Yeah,
that's a big change.
That's what I heard. So it's a complete change of paradigm, if you could say.
No kidding.
Mm-hmm.
Now, but Switzerland, I think, wrongly is sometimes considered by people who don't know the country very well as a tax haven. Right. And it's not a tax haven, but it's still tax friendly, wouldn't you say? Am I putting words in your mouth? I don't want to do that. But if it would be the case that it is considered to be a tax-friendly place to set up a business, for example, what kind of policies or laws could come about that could actually harm that reputation? Are there any dark clouds on the horizon, or would you see that this is smooth sailing for entrepreneurs that want to come here?
Okay. Yes. So I totally agree with you. We still often have this image, even sometimes in some movies, you see a guy with the cases
full of $100 bills.
I mean, this doesn't exist. No. Everybody would be in jail. I mean, just doesn't make any sense. Even the bankers are laughing when we see that. We see that less and less.
Right.
This is a sort of image from the past. So this clearly has gone. We are clearly into banks. A tax haven. I teach sometime at one university in Paris. I like a visiting professor, and I told the student, to a very big surprise, that we have a wealth tax in Switzerland. A wealth tax for individuals, which can go up to 1% on your worldwide assets in Switzerland.
Right.
Is that a tax haven?
Right.
Certainly not. So clearly. But as you say, it's a friendly tax situation for various reasons. The first reason, I think, is the so-called tax competition between the cantons.
Right.
I think this is very important.
Even between communes, right?
Even between communes.
Right.
So it means that everybody is a bit, each canton is looking at each other, communes as well.
Right.
And they cannot go outside a certain percentage of rates.
Right.
Because otherwise it's very easy. We are now in Geneva.
Right.
You can, a few hundred meters away, you are in canton of Vaud.
Right.
And if the situation is totally different,
right.
people will move, and they do actually move.
Sure.
You have court cases about transfer of residence, etc.
Right.
So this is one reason, I think, which kept some kind of a reasonable tax rate. Another also a good aspect is I would say, the pragmatic relationship that exists between the tax administration and the taxpayer. This is very healthy, and I'm trying really to favor this aspect. Is what we call, for example, the ruling policy. So in Switzerland, you can go to the tax administration, and you will be welcomed by them and describe your situation, and they say, yes, okay, we are going to tax you that way. It's a ruling. And this creates a very favorable climate between the tax authorities and the taxpayer, and a sentiment of trust and of good faith on both sides. And this doesn't exist always, I think, abroad. You receive a letter from the tax administration, you don't sleep for many days, depending on the country in which you are. In Switzerland, you can sleep. You have to, of course, you have to comply, but you can visit them, you can discuss, and reasonably you find a solution. Maybe that's another explanation. Now, there are a few, I would say, dangerous proposals that are on the line and that could harm Switzerland. One I want to mention is the so-called Young Socialist Party. They made a proposal. It's a federal initiative, so it will go in the federal constitution about adopting an inheritance tax of individuals with more than 50 million wealth. And above this 50 million wealth, you would have a 50% federal inheritance or gift tax.
Wow.
I think we would be the only country in the world implementing such a rule. So it's extreme. So many people say, don't worry, it will not pass. I say, let's be cautious. Because, 50 million Swiss francs, we are talking about a very small amount of the population. And based on our democratic system, maybe some people could say, okay, I don't care. I'm not affected by it. I say yes, they can pay.
If the rich,
they can pay. So this is very dangerous because, first of all, if this would occur, people would leave. And we are talking about entrepreneurs.
For sure. Absolutely.
And especially for enterprises, there are absolutely no rules for, let's say, parent-children relationship. So if you want, for example, a succession of your enterprise to your children, you would have to pay 50% inheritance tax. No rules for philanthropy. No rules between spouses. So you give the enterprise to your wife, you have to pay 50%. This is a very problematic
very
proposal.
Drastic,
But it's on the table. It has been, the number of signatures has been reached, so 100,000 signatures. So we will have to vote about this. So this is one example of a...
When will that come up? Probably in the next 12 months or so?
Yes, it's not so clear. It could already happen in November this year. Maybe it will be a bit too early. Otherwise, I think most probably March 2026.
A year from now or a little bit less.
We really have, I think, to work and to explain to the population the danger of this proposal. It's also very bad, I think, for the image of Switzerland, because honestly, we don't do that. For example, constitutionally speaking, you have a zero rate until 50 million Swiss francs, so 0%. And then you add 1 franc, and then everything above is 50% tax. Even from a constitutional standpoint, this doesn't make any sense.
No, that's true.
But we will have to vote about this.
Interesting. Interesting. And I guess we can expect to start seeing, maybe it's a little early, but we would begin to see the different political views being promoted, publicly for people to start thinking about it. Right?
For example, if the date is finally decided to be November,
right,
we might see, I would say, even after summer,
right,
or even maybe earlier,
right,
already some proposals,
the posters,
positions, and posters,
right,
and you can see some kind of images already on the posters.
Sure, of course.
Can you imagine
the we, the no, the the nine? Yes, exactly, all over.
Yeah.
Interesting. Wow, that's pretty dramatic stuff. But of course, well, in my earlier life, I actually worked for a while for a company that set up offshore trusts. And I would imagine that they would see pretty big business, but of course you still have to transfer your assets into those trusts, right? And I guess at that point, they, again, this is this transparency issue now.
Yeah.
Back in the good old days, if you want to call it that, that could be done totally under the radar.
Right.
But now, or maybe a year from now, if this were to happen, I don't suppose that's going to be an easy way out to avoid this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. Now, and since a few years already, there are many anti-avoidance rules against the use of offshore vehicle, be it an offshore company or a trust.
Right.
And there's been many court cases. So it's, I think it's not going to work anyway. For example, the tax administration could say, you created this vehicle, but it's very artificial. It's an offshore company. So in fact, we consider
still an asset of yours.
Transparent.
Yeah.
It still remains your asset.
Right.
Plus we put a fine because we think it's like almost, tax evasion.
You were trying to hide it, right?
That could even be now the trend.
Yeah.
And for a trust, there's been a circular from the Federal Tax Administration a few years ago, which says a Swiss resident cannot, in fact, from a tax standpoint, really put his asset under the trust, or he can, or she can, but it's going to be regarded as transparent.
Right.
Unless there's a special tax regime.
Right.
So I don't think it will be any...
that's not a solution.
That's not a solution.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of curious. I mean, obviously you published a lot on Swiss and international tax law, but how do you bridge the gap between sort of academic or conceptual ideas and putting these things into practice?
Yeah, that's a very good question. It's a question that I ask myself every day, in a way. Yeah,
I'm sure.
Yes, because, the two are very highly related.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think it's very interesting to have both, because sometimes I see a case in the firm and I think, this is quite interesting. I could even make like a practical case or explain, of course, without any names or without disclosing anything.
Like a case study for your courses, for example.
For the student.
Oh yeah.
So and retroactively on the same the opposite way. Sometimes I discuss with my student, and when I discuss, there's an interesting question from the floor, and I think, I should maybe analyze this further when I write a book or in a future case. Right. So it's a constant evolution of the ideas and implementation.
Right.
The problem is the stress, because it means you are always thinking about those rules and the evolution and adaptation. So I try to balance my life by doing other things to balance in the middle.
Right. We're going to get to that in a moment, right?
Okay.
I definitely want to talk about some of these things, right? But before we do, let's talk for a second about your book. I think it's really interesting that you have approached the subject of how do we address the potential shortfall in tax revenue that could come about if people are not working, because basically robots and AI are working in our place, right?
Absolutely.
So if we can take it easy, we're sitting on our beach in the Bahamas while a robot is doing our job or whatever, and maybe we're paid a universal basic income, maybe not.
Yes.
But there will be tax consequences of that,
Exactly.
and not just for the individual, but a big tax consequence for the country itself, right? For any country.
Yeah.
So you've written this book to address, what do we do here? And can you I mean, I don't want you to tell us, to summarize the book in 2 minutes, but tell us what you think. What direction are we going in, or what would work in this case?
Yeah. So I thought about this. Now it's almost 10 years ago. It started in 2016.
Yep.
And the first book I wrote first article was, let's say, 2016 and 17.
Right.
And then I wrote a book, and this is the second edition, but expanded edition.
It was originally entitled Taxing Robots.
Taxing Robots, exactly.
Yeah, and you've now broadened that a bit to taxing artificial intelligence.
What is interesting about this is that, when I made a big conference in 2017 at the University of Geneva, in fact, the rector asked me to make a conference about this. It was a very big conference, which is even on YouTube. So I arrived there very quiet and in good mood. And then it was very, very aggressive. I'm talking about 2017. So I described the idea.
Who was aggressive?
I mean, the public. There were 900 people, so it was in 2 rooms.
Oh, I see.
And some of the reactions were pretty positive, but some extremely aggressive. Okay. Even one guy lost his temper. He was almost trembling. He was so furious. I received even an email of even a warning, an anonymous email, saying, stop your research, something like that. So then I thought, okay, this is interesting. I need to follow up and to continue to study because there's something there.
Obviously.
So, and honestly, it's just an intellectual thinking, but it shows that it creates a very sensitive personal reaction to the people.
Right.
And I thought a lot about that. And I thought maybe the reason is that, in a way, for us as humans, it's a bit problematic to think about some machine or computer getting smarter than us. I think it's a ontological question, if I may call it that way.
Sure.
So maybe unconsciously, the reaction was so, wrong, but so aggressive. But because people start to fear, probably. I mean, this is my explanation.
Makes sense.
Anyway, in a summary, let's say there are 2 basic ideas about that, and I have 6 different, let's say, alternative to tax robot or
like 6 different scenarios.
6 scenarios, but the basic idea is very simple. Frankly, I can explain in 30 seconds.
Cool.
Yes.
Here we go.
As we said before. Boom. Exactly. Imagine that with the evolution of artificial intelligence, work disappears slowly, but really disappears.
For everyone.
For everyone.
Wow. Okay.
Or even is reduced drastically.
Correct.
That's the hypothesis.
Okay. Yes.
Then we have a big problem, of course.
Right.
The social security is bankrupt because social security relies on salaries.
Right.
So there are no more salaries.
Right.
Income tax from all the states is almost zero because there's no more salary. You have the income tax.
Right.
Second consequence. And even worse than that, the social security needs additional resources to pay all the unemployed people.
Oh, yes. Right.
But it has no money.
But we're all unemployed.
Yes. So, but it needs the money to help the people who are lost or even try to adapt to the new system.
Right.
And the fourth consequence is the value-added tax as well.
Oh.
Because if you don't have a salary, the consumption goes down.
Right.
And if there's no consumption, there's no value-added tax either. And value-added tax is the most important result for the state, in particular in the EU.
Oh, VAT is
more most important tax.
I didn't know that.
If you are a minister of finance, the first thing you do, implement a value-added tax. This is the best tax to raise revenue.
Okay.
So this is the consequences, again, only if the so-called pessimist scenario occurs.
Okay, yes, right.
The work disappears or is drastically reduced.
Right.
So in this scenario, I came out with many proposals.
Right.
And one, among other ideas, but one very simple idea is to say, when you own a house in Switzerland, for example,
Yep.
you have a tax on the so-called imputed rent.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
It's a theoretical rent
Right.
that is supposed to correspond to the rent you should have paid
Right.
if you were not the owner of that house.
Correct. It's basically kind of like you're paying yourself.
So this is, and it has been accepted by the court. It's
Yes.
constitutional. It's
Right.
so-called an imputed income.
Right.
So based on that, I've suggested to say an enterprise that replaces a human worker
Yes.
with a robot
Yes.
or with artificial intelligence now
Right.
is in fact sparing the cost of the salary
Right.
that it should have paid to the human being.
Right.
So then you can
And also the social costs, right?
right?
Right.
So then you can build, at least conceptually,
Right.
an imputed income
Right.
for that enterprise,
Right.
which is the salary
Right. That they've said.
that they should have, that is fair.
Right,
They should
right.
have paid
It's
to
the negative
corresponding
cost.
work by a human worker.
Right.
That's one of the basic.
And they would have to pay taxes on that.
They would have to pay tax on that. So
Okay.
that's one of the aspects. Another proposal is to look at the production factors of an enterprise. So to say you use capital and work.
Right.
So the work disappear. So you let's say impute some kind of ratios in order to implement a kind of a profit
Right.
arising from artificial intelligence. So that's a more technical, but another approach. And then comes the more, I would say, controversial proposal. So this is, I would say, rather, easy in a way to explain. Of course, people would say, yeah, you always think about taxing, you are the new tax. And so you can see the reaction, but at least I think you can argue about this. Huh?
Right. Right.
Again, if the salary and if the works disappear.
Right.
But I came out with another proposal, which is the most controversial, which is a bit science fiction, I agree, but which is quite interesting, I think. This proposal would occur, let's say, at the second stage. So the first stage would be to tax this so-called imputed salary. But at the second stage, you could say all our tax system is based on one principle, which is the ability to pay. You are a taxpayer
Right.
because you have an ability to pay.
Right.
You receive a salary,
Right.
maybe you have a wealth, etc. So you have an ability to pay.
Okay.
If you want to tax a robot or artificial intelligence, right now, you agree that this device has no ability to pay.
Correct.
It has no funds. It has no salary
Right.
to pay.
Its owner does, though.
The owner does, but eventually you could even think about creating a new entity,
Oh.
which is
I see
yes.
where this is going. Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the entity could be defined by the legislator,
Right.
the robot, so-called, I suggest, smart robot,
Right.
or then artificial intelligence,
Right.
under, of course, specific criteria that has to be defined by the legislator. This is the one which, of course, is very controversial.
Yeah.
So people say this is completely crazy. Nowadays, it's much less crazy than it was. Even some courts are thinking about the ownership of copyright of artificial intelligence. So why not come out with an idea that artificial intelligence, again, against some criteria defined by the legislator,
Right.
in the democratic process,
Right.
of course,
Right.
becomes a sort kind of a new entity and sort of a new taxpayer
Right.
subject to tax. And we can even define some funds, which will be attributed to this entity, which could then pay the tax,
Right.
even credit the value-added tax, the input value-added tax,
Right.
etc. So
Right.
this is the most controversial proposal, which is again at the second stage. Now, if you think about it, just for the discussion, 1 century ago, more or less, we didn't have a corporation. What is a corporation
Right.
as such?
Right.
A corporation is a creation from the legislator.
Right. Correct.
One day, it was in the United States and in England, more or less at the same time.
Right.
The Supreme Court in the United States and the House of Lords, they said, yes, under a certain condition, this reunion of assets
Right.
becomes an entity,
Right.
and we will call that a corporation,
Right.
which you can sue,
Right.
which can enter into contract,
Yeah.
And-
Becomes a legal person.
becomes a legal person,
Right.
and then subject to tax,
Right.
the profit tax.
Right. Right. Right.
So maybe today we are in a similar situation
Yeah.
as far as artificial intelligence is concerned.
Right.
One day, maybe the EU is now even thinking about that, but not for tax purposes, but for liability purposes also, to create a new legal entity,
Right.
which would be some kind of artificial intelligence,
Right.
which can be owner of legal rights,
Uh-huh.
which can be sued
Yes.
if they do something wrong, and then here comes the tax man,
Right.
as the Beatles would say, subject to tax.
Right. Right. Well, the taxman is always out there waiting, lurking in the bushes anyway.
I think it's even George Harrison that composed
Correct.
the song. Here comes the tax man.
Exactly. Exactly. That's interesting but it requires a little bit of a reconceptualization of what exactly artificial intelligence is, right? It's not just a set of programs, but now it's actually something else, right?
Yeah.
Kind of a
Totally. I mean, it's a huge, I would say, space for analysis, and we are not ready yet, of course. But it happened for corporation in the past.
Yeah.
We said, for example, it needs a purpose. You need the board of directors.
Right.
You need a share capital of, 100,000 Swiss francs.
Right.
I mean, you could do something like that for artificial intelligence.
Right.
I call it in my book, I call artificial intelligence a system. It has to be some kind of a system.
Mm-hmm.
Some idea that could relate to that would be to even talk about cryptocurrency. For example, this would be a tool where we use cryptocurrency and even to pay the tax.
Sure.
I mean, there are a lot of now. Then it's a universe, of course, in which we enter.
Yeah.
But conceptually, I think it's feasible.
Yeah. And you said a moment ago that we're not there yet, but things are changing fast, right? So this is not one of these things when you would say, well, 50 years from now, we might think about that. That 50, what normally would be 50 years might be 18 months to the way things are going now, right?
Exactly.
Right.
For example, when ChatGPT came out, it was a big surprise for the world.
No kidding.
And now it's part of our the life, and it has even improved.
Yes.
Or we see now the bias and the problems.
Yes.
But it's really getting everywhere in our life.
Sure.
And not only for bad things, also for very good things.
Of course.
Because people criticize me a lot in the past, and they say you are against innovation, you are against robots.
What?
No, I'm fascinated by artificial intelligence. On the contrary, for example, you could take very boring, very repetitive jobs and which are nowadays already done by robots,
right.
And it's great.
Right.
Fukushima, for example, in Fukushima, it's a robot which is going into the sea to check the level of radioactivity.
Right.
I don't think both of us would be really willing to go.
Not really. Not really.
Check this level. So we are happy that a robot can do that. So
right.
It's a favorable development, but we need to forecast and imagine I would say the pessimistic scenarios to make sure we can address them if they occur.
Sure. Well, I mean, I'm a scenario planner myself, and I mean, you can't ignore the scenarios that are plausible but not very pleasant, right? If you just say, "Oh, we're only going to pay attention to the ones that are rosy," and ignore those because they're unpleasant, I mean, you could be in for a bad surprise, right?
Yes, exactly. And take again this OECD discussion that we were mentioning at the beginning of our discussion. It's already more than 10 years that the OECD is talking about implementing these rules for digital multinational entities. It's been more than 10 years. And still today, we didn't get a real agreement. There was an agreement in 2021,
right?
The so-called Pillar 1 and Pillar 2.
Right.
But nowadays, we are completely blocked, apparently, especially for the Pillar 1, which is for digital companies. So it's already 10 years to get a major change in tax policies. So the same, of course, will occur for artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
So that's why I say we should think about it right now, because it will take a lot. It will take a lot of time to agree upon the essential element of such new rules of tax.
Yeah. Now, you personally, Xavier, I mean, are you doing more than just writing the book about this? Right? Are you advising the government or governments at the OECD level outside the country here?
Yeah. So I'm not advising directly at the OECD level so far, but I did a lot of conferences around the world. I'm teaching even one course at Paris University about taxation of artificial intelligence. It's a small course, but I'm doing one now.
Right.
And I'm still continue my research. I invited now there are many researchers around the world. In the States, there's one in Brazil, in Spain. I invited them in Geneva. We did a seminar last year, and we are going to publish a book with all the chapters covering various aspects of taxation of artificial intelligence. So the topic is going on slowly but surely, as we say in Switzerland.
Yeah. Right.
Yes.
Right. But I mean, ultimately, these conversations have to take place with the participation of the people who will make the decisions, right? So that's the legislators, legislators, right? So
the OECD is now considering it. So this process will go on with government. There was so far the Swiss government is against the proposal. There was a question from one member of the parliament. So there was an answer from the Swiss government, which I understand, because they say we don't want, of course, to be the only country in the world to levy a tax on artificial intelligence.
No, right, for sure.
This makes a lot of sense.
Right.
So I think it should more be at the level of the OECD, at the United Nations also, at a sort of a global entity which can cover many states. Not one single country should implement it. This, I think, also. Yeah.
Right. Interesting. Let me switch gears now.
Yes.
Okay. Now I want to get into something that's more personal for you.
Okay.
But I thought of a bridge. That's a bit clever, huh? Thank you, ChatGPT, by the way. It's about the music industry.
Yeah.
So obviously you're interested in music, and you are involved in music, even let's say the business side of music, or at least more than just the artistic side.
Yeah.
What do you think about the way that the music industry is taxed? Are there issues there that need to be resolved?
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting. This is a totally different topic, but it's true for me. I am in both, actually.
Yeah, both worlds, right?
It's part of my.
There was a little bit of an overlap.
Yeah, it was always like that, because I'm also a musician personally, and I'm in the Montreux Jazz Festival, as vice president and chairman of the opera in Geneva.
Yes.
So I can cover the music or business also from the inside, if I may say.
Right.
So talking about tax, there's a big issue right now, which is not really solved. There are some special rules for artists and sportsmen in double taxation treaties. Mm-hmm. It's the so-called Article 17, which basically says an artist, so a musician, or a sportsman, is taxable at the place of performance.
Oh.
Okay? Yeah, it's a rule that you find in all treaties around the world.
Oh.
So, for example, when we have someone coming to play at the Montreux Jazz Festival, for example, let's say the fee for the performance is taxable in Switzerland.
Oh, I did not.
Yeah. Yes. Same for Formula One drivers, etc.
Okay.
Now, a big question is, what is the income for performance? That's a big question. If I pay a fee for the concert, it's very clear.
Right.
But what about streaming later on?
Oh, yes. Or recording.
Is it the performance in Switzerland in the Montreux Jazz? Or is the performance taking place somewhere else, in a computer or in the computer of someone watching it at home.
Yeah, because that's the real-time performance is actually when I'm looking at it, right?
And now, one of the most important aspect of the remuneration of musicians in particular is done through streamings. Because now CDs, nobody except me maybe buys sometime a CD.
Me too.
There's only one shop, I think, remaining in Geneva, just to more or less. Yeah. So everything is streaming. So that's, I think, this is one area where we need more analysis and solution abroad.
Interesting.
This is the streaming, the income from streaming.
Right.
Not to mention another, of course, aspect, which is not so much on my competence, is the remuneration of a musician as such.
Right.
There's a big problem right now. Talking again about artificial intelligence, it appears that more and more songs that you listen on Spotify or other platforms are in fact done by artificial intelligence.
Yes, right.
Already now.
Right.
And all this goes beyond and circumvent, in fact, the copyright of the artist.
Right.
So it's not even a tax problem. It's even a problem of survival in a way for them.
Yeah.
So this is another area where
there's an ethical issue in there somewhere.
Yes.
Because, I mean, if artificial intelligence could actually recreate Elton John's voice perfectly, right?
Yeah.
Why couldn't someone then create a new Elton John album?
Yeah.
But Elton John's got nothing to do with it, right?
Yes.
Does Elton John actually own his voice? Does he own the frequency? Does he? I mean, and what is that? The scientific footprint of the voice that someone could say, oh yes, based on this analysis, this is Elton John's voice, and only Elton John is allowed to make money off of this set of.
And this kind of issues will come out for sure.
I think they're already starting to. Yeah.
There are already clones that are you can find on artificial intelligence.
Yeah. I mean, you're seeing that already now with visuals, right?
Yes, exactly.
Pretty soon, Marilyn Monroe is going to appear again in a movie.
Yes.
But since she's not alive anymore, how will that be taxed and remunerated?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think there was a Frank Zappa show already, but I think it was in agreement with the family.
Oh, it's who owns that only rights to his.
And there's a clone of Frank Zappa apparently,
right,
playing live with a band. I saw it on YouTube.
Right.
So
was it good?
Well, this is not.
It wasn't
if
perfect.
you are
Wasn't
me, a friend of Frank Zappa. It's not the same.
Okay.
Honestly, you want to just listen to the
real McCoy,
the real the solo and personality of Frank.
But they'll get there.
But it shows exactly what you say. I mean, this is just the beginning.
Yeah. That's right. That's right. So now tell us about your own musical activities, right?
Okay.
I mean, I know that you have these roles to play with the opera, with Montreux Jazz.
Yeah.
That's great. But as a musician yourself?
Tell
us about that.
Okay. So, I play electric guitar since more than 40 years.
Okay.
In fact, I started at the conservatorium with the oboe.
Really?
So I love the tone.
That's a logical leap, the oboe to the electric guitar.
Yes, and there's a logical leap because the tone, the tone of the oboe, I can make you listen some electric guitar player. If you just listen to the tone, it's very similar to the tone of the oboe.
Really?
I might surprise you, but yes, honestly, yeah.
Okay.
If you take, for example, some of Carlos Santana tone in the 70s, when he played the note, with a sustain, as we call it.
Right, yeah.
And then I play to you an oboe, you will see the similarity of the tone.
Honestly, if I closed my eyes, I wouldn't be able to tell which instrument it is.
Maybe not this one, but another guitar player, yes. Okay. You might, I could challenge you.
No kidding.
Honestly, it's very, very similar. This is the explanation I found, because otherwise it's true. The other explanation is the, let's say, crisis, adolescence crisis, as we call it, teenager crisis.
Right.
Because I had, my mother was a singer, if I could, not opera, but a singer.
Right.
And so I started the oboe conservatorium, and then I made my crisis at 12 years old, and I started electric guitar, to the big surprise of my parents, but I never stopped.
Okay.
And I always say it's one of the best things I did in my life, because it's so different.
Yeah.
And it's very creative.
Yeah.
And I even think it's very good. I have a lot of theories about this for the brain.
Sure.
Of
course.
For example, when you play live, I also play jazz fusion. My style is a bit in between. We call it fusion, jazz rock.
Okay.
By the way, one of my band is called Out of Law.
Out of Law.
Out of Law, and it's you can find it even on Spotify. It's a jazz rock band.
Okay.
And one of our hit is called Tax Audit.
Tax audit.
Yes.
Okay. There's always
So, yeah.
you're recalling your your other profession, right?
The beginning of the song, you see the bass starting, and it's like the tax administration is coming to your house. I think it's very healthy because, first of all, you play in a band,
Right.
So you need to, I would say, to adjust to the personalities of all the people around you.
Right.
Maybe there's a drummer, maybe the singer has a big ego.
Yes.
Maybe,
Right.
So you have to find a way. And when you play, you forget about all this and you try to make the best outcome out of all these personalities.
Right. Right.
And for me, I think it's a very helpful skill that music will help you to achieve.
I can understand that. You're actually saying that everyone needs to participate together.
Yeah.
And if that person has a huge ego, it doesn't really matter while we're working together,
Right?
Because we're all doing the part to make the product of all of our work together as good as it can be.
Exactly. So if you're a good musician,
I never thought about that.
Yeah. For example, for me, the best drummers are the drummers that listen to everybody.
Yes.
And when, for example, there's a guitar solo, the drummer will just go with you and put you as the highest possible, a good drummer.
Right.
For example, with Frank Zappa, this is very clear. If you listen to some of the guitar solo, the drummers are just unbelievable and they really promote the solo. So that's one skill. And when then you end your solo as a guitar player, then you make maybe then the singer in front. I mean, you try to accommodate.
Right.
So that's one skill.
Right.
Okay.
You're not trying to hog the attention. You're trying to actually
It's your turn now.
build on someone else's participation or contribution, right?
Yeah. And what counts is the music in globally speaking.
Right. Right.
The harmony that should make music. And another thing that is very good for music, especially in jazz, also in rock a little bit, is improvisation. Mm-hmm. Because when you improvise, for example, take the great saxophonist like John Coltrane, etc.
Right.
I would be surprised to look at what happened in their brains because you need to play accurately in a way.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Then you need to adjust to the chords.
Right.
And sometimes the chord they change rapidly, especially in jazz.
Right.
So you need to adjust the chord and still you have to play something which is beautiful, which is musical.
Yes. Right.
It's an interesting, let's say, exercise to do, right?
Sure. A lot of anticipation is in there
so
too.
you have to anticipate, you have to be creative,
Wow.
and yet you have to be in accordance with the harmony, and especially in jazz, sometimes the chords change very rapidly.
Yeah.
So you need to adjust very quickly. I think this is also a skill that I don't see so much in other areas that you really have to develop.
No.
It seems to me.
Yeah.
A bit like meditation, but it's a creative meditation in a way. That's my way of looking at it.
Has it helped you with your career as a professor and as a writer and as a
looking backwards, yes,
expert?
Yeah. For example, it also helped me with some clients because when you start to speak with someone who loves music, you go immediately to a different level.
Right.
No matter where you come from.
Right.
You get totally connected.
Yes. Right.
And I could tell you stories about some people that I didn't know were playing. For example, even once there was a very famous bass player. I cannot mention his name, but I found out that he even was in Woodstock. So I said,
really?
What? You were in Woodstock? So then for the next 1 hour, we were totally outside. Right. Nobody could even disturb us. And we were even talking about the tone of amplifiers.
Sure.
Oh, yes. And then you turn this button.
Right.
So it shows the kind of connection you get with the music.
Nice.
So this has helped. And another aspect, I think, in a way, is technology. Mm-hmm. I'm not so sure, but maybe my interest for artificial intelligence and robots is also linked with music. because I was always very interested with some musician like Brian Eno,
Sure.
which was a lot into technology.
Yeah.
He's one of the
Sort of ambient music.
ambient music,
Yeah, right.
electronic music.
Yeah.
Even Joe Satriani, you may not know, but he's a guitar player and he's also fascinated with robots. Some of his songs also are linked. There's a record called Engines of Creation.
I don't know that one.
So this has in a way connected me through music to technology and then robots and artificial intelligence.
Oh,
so
right.
this is maybe
There is a link there.
This is the link. Maybe, because otherwise I don't see that.
And are your other band members, are they also tax experts? Or
well,
what kind of backgrounds do they have?
Okay, so one of the band called this one Out of Law, we have six, and 3 of them are lawyers.
Okay.
Right. This band. The other one, I'm the yes, my other band is called Fisk.
Fisk. That's brilliant.
Yes.
That's brilliant.
It's called
For those of you who don't know what that means, it refers to the tax authorities, basically, right?
Yeah, Fisk.
Right. The fiscal authorities, right?
Yes,
Fisk is a great name for a band.
So yes, so the name is Fisk, even though it's a K at the end,
right?
To hide a little bit.
Yeah.
Which means, by the way, fish in Norwegian.
Right.
Told me.
Yeah.
Fisk.
Right.
Apparently
like a nilfisk.
So on this band is only professional. So and on this one I work with someone who is in electronic music.
Right.
Does a lot with machines.
Right.
So it's very interesting about what I do.
Yeah.
Because he's a musician, professional, but he's a lot into technology.
Right.
And I have a singer. So this other band is totally different from the first one.
That's fantastic. And do you play often? Are you performing in public or?
Yes, we do. I practice every day. Even in my office, if you have 2 minutes, I could show you. I have a few guitars.
No kidding.
Just here. Yeah.
Right.
Sometimes I even practice a little bit. And we play from time to time. I would say once every 2 months.
Okay.
Depends in some
in a club or
clubs.
something. Oh yeah.
We played at the Montreux Jazz Festival a few years ago.
Oh wow.
But at the off.
On some of the side
not
stuff.
At the Stravinsky.
Well,
but at the off. This was a great.
Keep dreaming. Keep dreaming.
Yeah, and we had the singer, by the way, of Carlos Santana.
Oh.
Who is a friend of mine. He joined us on stage.
Wow.
So for the encore, and we played together.
Nice.
But this is more than 10 years ago.
Yeah.
10 years ago, yeah.
How did you get connected to the Montreux Jazz Festival?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So that's...
You knew Claude Nobs?
I didn't know so much Claude Nobs, actually.
Yeah.
But I met one of the members of the board.
Mm-hmm.
We had a case together, and I didn't know he was on the board of the Montreux Jazz Festival.
Mm-hmm.
So we had lunch together. We even have a proposal to make something together. And then he said, I have to leave you because I have the board of Montreux Jazz Festival. I said, wow, this must be very interesting.
Yeah.
And then he looked at me and said, we might need someone like you.
Right.
This is how it happened.
Yeah.
So
great.
And I said, well, see what you think. We can talk about it later on. And I completely forgot about that.
Oh.
And maybe 4 months later, even more, I don't know, I received a call from the chairman at that time, François Carrard, chairman of the Montreux Jazz at the time. And he called me and he said, Xavier, so okay, we see you in June, as discussed for the board. I said, which board are you talking about?
You're just on.
At the Montreux Jazz Festival. I said, okay, I will be there.
You're on, and
I was like, this is how it was.
Wow, that's
and then I became really close friend to Claude Nobs. It's it's someone I still miss today.
Yeah.
And I always say, sometimes you meet people in your life, and these people, they don't know it, but they will change your life.
Of course.
And he changed my life.
Really?
He had a very strong influence on me.
Yeah.
Especially in the artistic area.
Yeah.
I started to play more music, to develop to very broadly, and to do what I really feel I want to do. And because before that, I was a bit too, let's say, stuck into my, let's say,
work
world. He really opened it to me because it was such a generous, let's say, imaginative person.
Yeah.
He was an amazing person.
Yeah.
And everybody will tell you that.
I was going to say, I think a lot of artists who come to Montreux have had that relationship with him.
Yeah.
And they say, they have all these wonderful stories to tell about how he changed them somehow. But you're talking about people like Prince.
But totally.
How could someone like Prince be changed by an old guy like Claude Nobs?
And he's a very simple person.
Yeah.
Not complicated at all,
Right.
but generous, authentic.
Yeah.
And he had so much ideas all the time. So every year we would look at the festival.
Yeah.
We sit all together and we looked what went well, but what went wrong.
Okay.
Every year
Yeah.
we're redoing it.
Right. And
How many companies do that? Not many.
All of them should, but not many do.
And
That's
he
true.
did it, and he did the right way. And it's amazing what he did.
Fantastic.
And you're right. I was unfortunately not a member of the board at that time, but he was a very close friend of David Bowie, very close of, as you say, Prince, Freddie Mercury,
Right.
who even had an apartment on the lake.
Right. And a studio, I think, somewhere in Montreux. Right?
All these, and Quincy Jones, of course. I mean, all these people, amazing people in the music history, actually. And he's part of that, I think.
And I think if he was just a normal impresario, it would just all be about business and, and this relationship wouldn't necessarily be the same at all, right? But he was some kind of real inspiration, right?
You know what? One of I sometimes say the craziest days of my life was 10 days with Claude Nobs in Cuba. We went together in La Havana, and it was just unbelievable. 2009. February 2009.
But had a musical focus, I guess.
Musical, we were going out, seeing all these musicians.
Oh, yeah.
I could not even follow him at that time. Can you imagine? And he was older than me. I could not follow him. There was some time I was just so...
his energy level was so high?
But still fascinated.
Yeah. It must have been great.
I miss this period, honestly.
Yeah. It was really sad what happened. I don't want to end on a bad note, but I think maybe... We've covered a lot of really interesting stuff, and I can't thank you enough for your time, because there's a lot of food for thought here. Not that I would ever be involved in these kinds of things, but they're all going to touch me and all of us, right?
Yeah.
And like you said, since ChatGPT is part of our everyday life already, or AI, let's just say, not just one brand. It won't be long before all these issues are just going to be front and center for everyone. Yes. And if you are an entrepreneur thinking about coming to Switzerland, which is kind of a lot of the people who follow GGBa that's their profile. These kinds of things are not that far off the horizon, really, to think about. And it sounds to me like, if I can summarize, that Switzerland is really on the leading edge of thinking about these things.
Yes.
And it's thanks to people like yourself who are bringing these topics, are thinking about them, but also bringing them to the people who can make a difference. So it's just been a great chance to talk to you, and I look forward to maybe you'll tell me what club you're playing in, and we'll see each other.
I'm on Instagram, and I put every time I do a concert, I mention it, but I will keep you informed.
Yeah,
of course, we will keep in touch.
Love to.
You. Yes.
That would be great.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Xavier.
It was
really
quite
appreciate
interesting, and you even were able to make me mention also personal things, which I don't usually do, but it was because it's a good discussion, I think, and a deep conversation. So I really thank you for that.
No, well, I mean, it's you. Thank you very much. I hope I didn't get too deep.
No, not at all. No, it's okay. No problem. It's nice. My life, no problem.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Would you sign this for me?
Yes, with pleasure.
For me?
Yeah.
Personally?
For you. Okay.
You have a pen? Here I have.
Yes, sir. Yes. So yes, I can take this one. Yes.
There you go.
Yeah. So I can say to
Woody. Yeah.
Woody,
right. Absolutely. My real name is James, but my father's name was James, and my grandfather's name was James. So they started calling me Woody when I was born.
Yeah.